The first thing that sticks out to you are the markers. Marble markers dot the Little Bighorn Battlefield, like tombstones. Each one supposedly shows where one of Colonel George Custer's troopers was killed. It's the only place in the world like it. Let's find out more about these Custer markers. Now in total, the U.S. Army lost 258 soldiers at the Little Bighorn, plus 10 civilian employees. About 210 of those were with George Custer. After the fight, the dead soldiers were stripped, looted, and mutilated by the victorious Indians. Heads were smashed in, limbs were cut off, you name it. The additional trauma rapidly sped decomposition. Then the bodies baked in 90-degree weather for 2 days before they were found on June 27, 1876. Only about 25% of the bodies were able to be identified by the surviving members of the regiment. They quickly covered the bodies with loose dirt and sagebrush. It was the only thing they could do. Over the next couple of years, the Army sent expeditions to recover officers' remains and rebury exposed human bones. In 1881, a monument was put in place at Last Stand Hill, and a trench was dug around its base. The soldiers placed all the human bones they could find in the trench and marked where they had found the bones with wooden stakes. In May 1890, Captain Owen Sweet received orders to mark where Custer and his men fell with 249 marble markers. 246 are placed on the Custer field, 2 are placed on the Reno-Benteen side, and 1, Lieutenant James Porter's, is brought back to the post. Today there's around 252 markers on the Custer side of the battlefield. Let's take a closer look at them. Now first, we know some of the markers are obviously false. Some markers are placed for people whose bodies were never identified. Others have been excavated without finding any artifacts or remains around them. Another quirk of the markers is their pairing. Today there are 43 marker pairs. Now early thinking was that these pairs represented a soldier and his bunkie, what today we'd call his battle buddy. Later theories were that the markers were placed at a person's head and feet, they represented a soldier and his mount, or the depressions that were on each side of the actual body where dirt was scraped up looked like graves and markers were placed there. Now there's a few caveats. Each marker has an assigned number to it, but the numbering can get a little funky. We'll be looking at the markers in numerical order, not in battle or death order. I want to focus mainly on marker location and marker credibility for this video. We'll leave battle theories for later videos. Individual markers may not show up in the tightest groups on the video. Sorry about that. First, let's orient ourselves. North is to the left of your screen. The main landmark on the battlefield is Battle Ridge, which runs roughly north to south for a little bit longer than half a mile. At the north end is Last Stand Hill, with Calhoun Hill on the opposite side. West of Last Stand Hill, the ground slopes downhill to a deep ravine that eventually empties into the Little Bighorn River. West of Calhoun Hill, the ground rolls in a couple of ridges before descending to the river. Finally, Deep Coulee borders the field to the south. We'll start by looking at one of the most controversial areas of the entire field, Deep Ravine and the South Skirmish Line. This area will have to be its own video later on, but for now, just know the markers here and what they represent are hotly debated. Near the head of Deep Ravine, archaeologists found artifacts at every marker they excavated. At marker number 2, they found human bones, along with 6 different bullet types. They also found bullets fired straight into the ground at marker number 7. Now marker 17 is named for Dr. George Lord, one of the regiment's surgeons. This is probably a false marker. Lord was tentatively found on Last Stand Hill. Captain Sweet put a marker here for him due to some staff buttons that he found here, along with some bone. Moving up, this line of markers is known as the South Skirmish Line. All I can tell you right now is something happened here. There's enough bones and artifacts to prove that. Marker number 34 has been renamed for Mitch Boyer. He was an interpreter who told Custer's other scouts he would go die with Custer. Facial bones and objects found here led to Mitch's identification a few years ago. At marker number 48, we have 2nd Lieutenant James Sturgis. Sturgis was the son of the regiment's actual commander. In 1878, Sturgis's mother received permission to visit the battlefield and see her son's grave. The only problem was he didn't have one. Soldiers created a tomb for her visit so she would have a place to mourn, but it was an empty grave. His underclothes and possibly his head were found in the village area after the battle, but his body was never identified. North of Last Stand Hill, near the Indian Memorial, there are 2 markers. One or both of them probably represent Sergeant Major William Sharrow, whose body was recognized north of Last Stand Hill. At 31 years old, he was the highest-ranking enlisted man in the regiment. Now we come to Last Stand Hill. On top of Last Stand Hill, soldiers found Lieutenant Colonel George Custer, his brother Captain Tom Custer, and his adjutant, First Lieutenant William Cook. Sergeant John Vickery and Chief Trumpeter Henry Voss were piled together feet away. These men were moved a few yards down the hill and buried near their current markers. Marker number 93 represents Second Lieutenant Henry Harrington. It's a fake marker. No trace of Lieutenant Harrington was ever found. There are also markers for First Lieutenant Algernon Smith, Captain George Yates, and Second Lieutenant William Riley. At the base of Last Stand Hill are markers 82 and 83 for Harry Reed and Boston Custer. Reed was George Custer's 18-year-old nephew, brought out to see the show, while Boston was George's younger brother, who had gotten hired as a packer and a guide. Moving south along the west side of Battle Ridge are markers 111 through 120, which are set in isolated clumps. Now we move toward the river, to the 120 series markers. 122 and 123 are on Calhoun Hill. We'll see them in a second. These other lonely markers are rarely seen by tourists, but are probably accurate. Archaeologists excavating around marker 128 found a pit containing the bones of a trooper they called Trooper Mike. The trooper's leg was found nearby, still wearing its cavalry boot. South of this marker, there's a small rise that overlooks Greasy Grass Ridge. On this rise, 2 Company C sergeants, August Finkel and Jeremiah Finley, were found, giving the rise its name. Finkel was located around marker 131, and Finley was found near 139, but today neither sergeant has a named marker. Uphill from this position, we pass more markers until we get to the summit, named Calhoun Hill after First Lieutenant James Calhoun. He was George Custer's brother-in-law. A few feet away from him, soldiers found Second Lieutenant John Crittenden. 22 years old and the son of a well-known Union general, Lieutenant Crittenden had a prosthetic eye as a result of a shooting accident. His body was identified by an arrow which had shattered his glass eye. From Calhoun Hill, a line of markers trailed through a shallow ravine toward a disorganized mass of markers. This is the Keogh cluster, named after Captain Miles Keogh, marker 199. A veteran who had fought in Europe in the Civil War, Keogh's body was stripped, but otherwise untouched. His trumpeter John Patton's body lay across him. Keogh was surrounded by several of his NCOs who died next to him. In all, there's 19 markers in this cluster. Markers erratically moved northward from the Keogh cluster along the east side of Battle Ridge. Marker number 207 is named for First Lieutenant James Porter. Decades after the battle, a marker was placed here in his memory, but there's no evidence to support it. The only trace of Porter ever identified was his bloody jacket found in the Indian village after the battle. Continuing north, we come to marker 247, placed for Mark Kellogg. Kellogg was a correspondent for the Bismarck Tribune and the first Associated Press reporter to be killed in the line of duty. Kellogg was possibly killed northwest of the battlefield, near the river, or in the south skirmish line area, so this is probably an inaccurate marker. Since he was not in the Army, he was not initially given a marker, but newspaper organizations set him up with one. The last few markers lead us back toward Deep Ravine. Eyewitnesses state at least a few soldiers, and as many as 28, were found inside Deep Ravine. One soldier was reportedly identified at the mouth of the ravine near the river. Today there are no markers in Deep Ravine. One more element that adds to this battlefield's mystery.